Shalom, giving all praise to Yahweh Bashim Yahushua Bashim Kakodash. UFOs. Well, let me say it like this. Let me change the subject. The title. The scholars know that UFOs are biblical. What I mean by that is they know that there's many scriptures that describe what we call UFOs. And we all know these scriptures. We all know this subject. But this is what I did was I put in UFOs. I believe I put in UFOs in the Bible, biblical scriptures or whatever, and it led me to a site called named openbible.info, and you put in a particular subject and it'll give you all the scriptures pertaining to that word or that subject. So I said, well, let me put in the word UFOs, and all the scriptures that we're familiar with is on this list. So Esau definitely knows that the Bible scriptures speak about what Esau refers to as UFOs. So I'm not going to read a bunch of scriptures. What I'll do is I'll mention the various verses, chapter and verses. So it starts off with Ezekiel 1, verse 1 to 28, and that whole chapter is dedicated to Ezekiel encountering 4 UFOs or angels that were in the UFOs. There's a movie out that came out, I believe in 69 or 70, called Chariots of the Gods, and I remember as a child seeing that movie and getting all into it. And in the movie, they mention that UFOs are mentioned in the scriptures, and they go into Ezekiel, the first chapter. Anyway, the next scripture, as you can see, I'm going to put this up raw, is Zechariah 5, verse 1 and 2. So Esau is telling you that they know. Well, it says this. It says, this is from the ESV, the English Standard Version. It says, again, I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, a flying scroll. And he said to me, what do you see? I answered, I see a flying scroll. Its length is 20 cubits, and its width 10 cubits. So what did he describe? A flying object. Ezekiel 1, verse 4 and 5. It mentions 2 Kings 2, verse 11, which says in the ESV, and as they still went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire, which they can only describe as a UFO. And if you ever seen a UFO with your naked eye, they're different shapes. One UFO is different from another. Well, every once in a while, the last time I saw UFOs was a fleet of UFOs with the rest of the brothers in New York, where we spoke at, and it happened right at the close. It happened a couple of times right at the closing of camp. And the UFOs or the ships or the chariots will position themselves where we can clearly see them. If we had a good camp, you would see them, and they would be as much as 100 ships, and they would all look the same. But then again, I've seen one UFO which actually transformed into another UFO in front of my eyes, excuse me, and turned into, it went from a square. It looked like the ship, if you ever watched the Star Wars, not Star Wars, but the Star Trek series with Captain Picard. They had a couple of episodes called The Borg, and they flew around in a square black cube. And that's when I saw that ship, that's what it looked like. And then it actually transformed into a flying disc of many colors and disappeared in the sky. I mean, it was vivid. There were other people around me bugging out, and this is when I first came into the truth. This is like the mid 80s. Had to be 85, 86. So it says, 2 Kings 2 verse 11, and as they still went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. So he was beamed up into a ship. You got Isaiah 60 verse 8. Who are these that fly like a cloud and like doves to their windows? Amos 9 and 3. Now as he went on his way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. That's a ship. Revelation 16 verse 14, Ephesians 6 verse 12, Ezekiel 1 verse 16, Psalm 68 verse 17. Now when you go to the 13th verse of Psalm 68, it speaks about the ships made of gold and silver. It says the chariots of the Most High are twice 10,000, which is 20,000. Thousands upon thousands. Yahweh is among them. Sinai is now in the sanctuary. Oh, Colossians 1 verse 16. For by him all things are created in heaven and on earth. So they talk about beings from another planet. Well, if there's beings from another planet, the Lord created them. But they're not beings from another planet, they're angels in ships. Ezekiel, the 10th chapter goes into it. Surprised it didn't show Acts. Acts the 1st chapter where the Lord was taken up into a cloud. That was a chariot, a ship, a UFO. Oh, Daniel 7 verse 9. And I looked, and it's from the ESV. And I looked. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothes were white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool, which indicates that he's a so-called black man. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning a fire. So that would have to be what we would call a UFO. The U in a UFO means unidentifiable. verse that's clearly talking about a gigantic ship. And out of the ship came seraphims, which means flying fiery serpents, which are angels in shuttle ships. Oh, here it is, Acts. And I'll close on this one. Acts 1 verse 9 to 11. And when he had said these things, as they were looking on, he was lifted up, he was beamed up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. And the angel said, and while they were gazing into heaven as he went, behold, two men which were angels stood by them in white robes and said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This says here Jesus, I don't like to use that word, that name, who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. And that would be Matthew 24 verse 27. For as the lightning cometh from the east and shineth as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So the way he left in a UFO, and he's going to come back in a UFO. There's a lot of precepts here. I'm surprised they didn't put in the Revelation, the 10th chapter. There's a lot of they put in a lot of scriptures, but they left out a lot of scriptures as well. Let me see what this one says. Deuteronomy 33 verse 26. There is none like the Most High, O Jerusalem, or Yeshurun, who rides through the heavens to your help, through the skies in his majesty. Anyway, with that, I'm going to say shalom.